Hey, welcome everybody. Welcome to this panel, and I'm very grateful to you all for joining us. Now, I'll just get the technical side set up. I have muted everybody. I think I've done this correctly. I've muted everything apart from the panelists. So what I was planning on doing, just to do the housekeeping first. So first of all, welcome everybody to this panel on unlocking live events in the Highlands and Islands. My name's Simon McKerrell from Newcastle University, and I'm really delighted that we've got a fantastic panel here. We've got Mairearad, musician and visual artist. We've got James Mackenzie-Blackman, Chief Exec of Eden Court Theatre, and we've also got Graeme Howell, Chief Exec of Shetland Arts. So it's fantastic, and thanks so much to all of them for giving up their time on this bank holiday Monday, and for all of you for coming along as well. I'm just admitting the last few people in the waiting room. What I'm going to say is, I think to keep this manageable, because I think what I'd like to do is, if we could put any questions in to the chat as and when you have any, and we'll work our way through those. I've got a few kind of basic things to discuss, but before we begin, I just wanted to say a big thank you and a big shout out also to the Touring Network. I think many of you will know the Touring Network. That's the organisation that helps promoters network across rural Scotland. I think Bronwyn may well be on the call, but I just want to say thank you to Claire and Rhiannon and Bronwyn from the Touring Network for helping with this research, and also for being so supportive of this current project. Okay, so without any further ado, I think we'll just get started. So we've got a mix of both island and mainland people in the Highlands and Islands. We're in the position now, I think, where the Scottish Government have said that they're looking towards the 17th of May for some beginning of some limited outdoor events at least, and end of June for some other events, maybe some larger events outdoors and some indoors. But I suppose at this point in time, I think I just want to get a sense to start off with from our panel about where you're at and what you're thinking about this coming summer in the Highlands and Islands, and what you're sort of planning for at the moment. So if we could start maybe say with Mairearad alphabetically. Mairearad, what are you thinking as a musician and visual artist? Tell us what you're thinking about for this summer and beyond in terms of your planning.
Well, I've got very few gigs in the diary for the summer, just Spayfest being one of them, an outdoor big event. So I've really been planning with COVID in mind and just thinking keep things more local, have things more bespoke. I've just built a studio in my garden in Ullapool, and I'm going to have some pop-up events, I think, and so that should just combining my art and music together in that regard. And outdoor events, if I have the capacity in my garden to do really small one-off gigs, weather dependent, obviously. And then going forward beyond the summer, I do have a tour booked in October. At this stage, we don't know if that's going to definitely go ahead and in what way it will go ahead. But
so is that a duo tour, or is it something else? Or
that's with Anna Massey, and it'll be a UK tour.
Yeah. Okay, great. So you're sort of making plans for more digital events then, but also some in person in the autumn, yeah?
Yeah, I don't have digital events planned yet, but this is something that would be great to chat about, is just how to make things more digital. From my perspective, I'm a bit of a technophobe, so the whole idea of I've watched a lot of live streaming events and they've been wonderful, but I think I would like to look into that. One of the great things I did back in November was with Antober Arts Centre, And the setup they had there was really exciting going forward. Just if we do have to reduce the capacity of live gigs, especially really small live gigs, which is what mainly that I would be doing. There's small art centres, there's small village halls. How do you, that's been one of the benefits of COVID, is that idea of actually people in America can benefit from these really intimate gigs. So yeah, the setup in October is just these remote cameras that you, not even an operator behind the camera, so you really feel it's very intimate, and it's a lovely venue, as you know. And I think the atmosphere really did translate, and even more so going forward if we've only got half the capacity of an audience. But with that digital side at the same time, I think that could be really special and more inclusive for people further afield.
For all sorts of people. Thanks, Mairearad. Right, Graeme, what's happening for Shetland Arts Trust? I mean, what are you thinking about for the summer?
So we're currently in protection level 3 as opposed to protection level 4. So the islands are one protection level further down the chain. And although we haven't heard anything from Scottish Government, we're hoping to be moving to protection level 2 at the end of April, when everyone else moves down to protection level 3, which will enable us to bring back cinema at that point. And then, so we may be slightly ahead of the curve for you all. Right now, Shetland Arts is putting, I think it's 15 various new works, new productions, new pieces out online under the heading Refresh Now. This was all funding we got through the Performing Arts Venue Relief Fund, and we were hopeful that these were going to be live events, that we were going to be restarting venues. We weren't expecting to be shifting up to protection level 3, so we've had to pivot very quickly and put these things online, film them, and all sorts of things. And we, at the same time as getting the money to support the creative content, we also got a chunk of money to support skills development within the creative sector in Shetland. So we're obviously paying the film crew as part of a training session on filming live events. So we'll have a team of people going forward who have got experience in that. We've been offering equipment and training on how to set up streaming at home and everything. So we've been trying to upskill the sector to see what impact that has. Looking forward, we will probably, and as soon as we can bring back live events, we will, but we'll probably stay focused on Shetland-based musicians initially, to try and reduce the chance of bringing anything up to Shetland that the community would be against. But from September onwards, we're planning to do a screenplay, we're planning to do a wordplay, so that's our film and literature festivals. Both of those will be blended, and we've got visits penciled from everyone from Scottish Chamber Orchestra through to Dog Star Theatre Company, the East Pointers, a whole bunch of people. So a lot, and sorry, Simon?
Just saying, it's quite upbeat. There's a lot kind of on the cards then. You're really kind of starting to pack it in.
Yeah, well, I mean, we're taking the position that we've got to plan this stuff and hope that the restrictions move to a point where it makes it happen. Because if we wait for the restrictions to move to the point that makes it possible, we're then 2-3 months behind on the planning. And I think there's a lot of latent demand in the system. I mean, obviously, we're having active conversations with agents about under what conditions can this gig go ahead, you know, what's the threshold for pulling it, you know, so as things ebb and flow. And I think that's going to be quite a feature of the business going forward, is to make sure that everyone is agreeing, you know, what are the thresholds for things to happen, as it were. So, but yeah, we're pushing forward. I mean, you know, we can't wait for it to get there. We've got to start the planning.
Starting the programming, yeah. That's excellent. Thanks so much, Graeme. James, do you want to just give us a sense of where the Eden Court is at for you and what you're thinking about for this summer and beyond?
Yeah, hello everyone. It's really great to be here. Thanks for inviting me, Simon. I I guess I preface all of this by saying this is the position as of today, right now, and it is highly likely to change within the next 2 to 3 hours, as it has done for the last 12 months. But today, this is what I feel about it all. We are planning that our outdoor summer music festival with Face Roche under Canvas will be able to take place this summer on our lawn at Eden Court. One of the key drivers on us needing to decide that we wanted that to happen was that the global demand in tents has gone kind of quite stratospheric, so we had to purchase,
as in camping, camping tents,
commercial, like all kinds of tents, but particularly commercial tents, big tents. So Under Canvas has existed under a stretch tent, and if we wanted Under Canvas to happen this summer at Eden Court, we needed to place the order in late February. So so we had to commit that expenditure in February, when there was even more unknown than there is now. Many of the things that anyone who's been at Under Canvas will know that what has been so fantastic about it is that it is relaxed, it is family friendly, it is free, and it is drop in. All of those things that probably are highly unlikely to be possible given the current operating conditions this summer. So we're working really hard with the team at Eden Court to set the conditions and work out how we create that really special inclusive aesthetic and vibe inside and under the tent, whilst also making sure that we're keeping to all of the very specific COVID guidance and criteria that we'll need to follow. I'm a little bit anxious that Scottish Government have still not published their updated performing arts guidance. There was a moment about 15 to 20 days ago where I was told it was coming within days, and it's not come. My concern about the reason it's not come is around the thing that everyone here, I'm sure, will also be aware of or thinking about, because it's very much in the news, been in the news over the last couple of days, but the dreaded language of COVID and certificates next to each other, or COVID and passport next to each other. We'll hear later today what the plan is for England in relation to COVID certification. I sat on an industry body for the last 2 weeks in order to give a response to the Cabinet Office on the introduction of COVID passports and security for the certification for the performing arts sector. And I think it's fair to say that it's fraught with significant issues and challenges, not just around health data, but significant ethical issues around asking people to declare or gain access to the performing arts as a result of their smartphone going green, for example. So I think that could be really coming up on the outside lane, and could be the next thing that poses real significant challenge. Just really quickly, looking beyond the summer, Eden Court is operating off 3 cash flow models at the moment. One is where live performance is possible without social distancing from late October. One where live performance is possible without social distancing in February 2022, and one where that's not possible until April or May 2022. And we are managing the business taking into account those 3 models.
Okay, well, that seems like a suitable point for me to do my fancy launch poll. So I've set up a poll for everybody who's on this meeting. So it should appear for you somehow on your screen. When might small live indoor events begin again? So just pick an answer and see. Let's have a look what people on the call think. That's small live indoor, not obviously outdoor. But yeah, it looks to me like most people are saying September, autumn 21. There's some optimists in there looking at June and July as well, which is good. But the majority opinion is September or autumn 21. So that's interesting. Even if the case that the advice changes that we were actually allowed to have indoor events from June. I think, as Graeme was saying, the programming issues are such that, you know, planning would need to be taking place now. Okay, so I don't know if you can see that, but I'm going to end that poll there. The one thing I also wanted to know from people was, do you think, I mean, Mairearad was talking a little bit about, and also I think, well, actually all three of you were talking about hybrid or blended events. Do you think that that kind of live events, blended or hybrid thing is an actual goer? Is that going to be something that people are going to be doing more of in the future? Does it involve changing your practice at all? I mean, what's your view? If you want to just, you know, tell me what you think, chip in.
So I think, being based in Shetland, we've always, certainly in the last 5 or so years, we've always done a certain amount of streaming. Our Hogmanay events always been streamed online very successfully. A whole variety of kind of little bits and pieces. I think that there is, you know, there's still a significant digital divide when you get to the more rural parts of Scotland, and streaming stuff isn't the kind of panacea of access that it may well have been. I think the other real challenge is how you monetize the online experience, how you price that in such a way that it makes the events doable. We were planning for a Hogmanay event this December and had to pivot and put that out online. And we put it out online for free with a donations button, something like 32,000 views and £600 in donations. So that's not a viable business model going forwards. And I think as well, if you're looking at hybrid events, how do you price the experience of being in person against the experience of being online? Also, we're getting a certain amount of discussion going with artists about, well, actually, I don't want my event online for the next week or month. You know, this is what I sell on a day-to-day basis. So, you know, you can put it up live in that moment. And so, yeah, so I think there's a number of challenges. I also think that the live experience is about coming together. It is about, you know, that sense of community, that sense of occupying the same space. And I think until we can resolve some of these issues digitally, how we create proper, substantial digital communities, then I think the live experience will always win out against any sort of hybrid. However, I think hybrids will be with us until we're back to operating at some level. And I think it is also worth saying that, you know, the truth of being human is we're resilient and we're forgetful. You know, we will find a way of living with this as things progress. It's just how we get through the next couple of years and how the sector gets through the next couple of years that is the interesting challenge.
Yeah. Other thoughts, Mairearad, James, on that hybrid blended?
Yeah, I think, as Graeme said, like the whole beauty and joy of live music is that human interaction, and especially folk music is about people being in the room together and that intimate connection that it just doesn't translate. And yeah, how do you, it's quite disappointing to hear that only £600 was raised out of 32,000 people, because I would, going forward, I'd love to show people in Australia an intimate gig in Nackletonbury Village Hall, but how do you get the equipment, the internet connection? I'm not sure how the infrastructure is there for those sorts of things yet.
Would you like to see more help from government or from arts agencies, from local government about digital infrastructure? Would that be useful for you?
Absolutely, yeah. On an individual artist, self-employed person's level, that would be really, really helpful. And as I was saying, on that more small-scale community level, I think it would be essential going forward. I mean,
that's a really interesting point. I think, one of the things coming out of this project that I'm doing in music in the rural Highlands and Islands at the moment is that most musicians are, obviously you will know, and you can speak for them. Self-employed sole traders, they're not hitting the VAT registration level of 85 grand, or at least not the ones I know aren't anyway. But the, you know, what there's something really interesting, I think, in the project that's coming out, is that everything is being done by either third sector charities or individual musicians clubbing together, collectivizing. And, you know, it does appear that government is absent from these conversations. Is that your experience?
Yes, I mean, we've had the self-employed grant, which has some people have even slipped through the net with that. And the Creative Scotland Hardship Fund has been fantastic. But other than that, that's my only experience.
James, coming back to that question about hybrid and blended and things like that, what's your feeling in that area?
I've got an awful lot of thoughts about it. I mean, my entire business model was based on bringing people together and celebrating an experience live. And so for an organisation the scale of Eden Court, you know, there's a significant challenge around moving to a business model where significantly less people come. You know, that there's a great truth in, or a great debate, I think, ahead of us about how we position and value watching an artist at home versus watching an artist in an environment like Eden Court. I mean, from an Eden Court perspective, we are both theatres and cinemas. I think there's a very interesting and perhaps a bit more of a pressing debate around how people consume film specifically. You know, people are increasingly accustomed to experiencing film at home in leisure wear and not matching socks on 4G TVs the size of a goal, you know, a football goal, and I think probably the challenges that we have ahead of us around cinema are probably, you know, the pandemic, it will only have made the whole case for coming together to watch film more of a challenging, more of a challenge. But having said all of that, having taken receipt of some emergency funding in just recent months, we are going to be purchasing the necessary tech equipment so that we can live stream from Eden Court if we, in conversation with artists, decide that that's something we want to do. So, you know, as a business, we are taking the steps to put in place the mechanism through which in which we can do that, but I think it's really complicated.
Yeah, I've heard that actually from a few folk actually in interviews as well, that the technology for live streaming presents you know, it's not something that the average person could learn to do quite quickly, because there's so much about the latency and the technology if you want to do it in a kind of semi-professional or professional way. So I just wonder, actually, it makes me wonder about how successful the hybrid events will be. So
and you know, and there's, you know, I think the point that was made about donation versus tickets, you know, buying a ticket for watching a live stream event is fascinating. And you know, there was clear, I think it was the Royal Opera House that fairly near the beginning of the pandemic put some dancers from the Royal Ballet or on stage at Covent Garden and put it up on their YouTube channel and got 3.4 million views, and the event was free, and they thought, oh, we're onto something here. So they put it behind did it 6 weeks later, put it behind a paywall and charged, I think, $4.99, and, you know, got something like 6,000 views as opposed to the millions that they had when the event was free. So you know, just there's other examples that are very similar to that, you know, if you get the please donate message, the please donate message can work harder than if you'd put stuff behind a paywall. So yeah, it's tricky. It's tricky.
One, just sorry,
yeah,
Sam, just to jump in. One of the things that we're hoping to exploit is bringing through streaming, but bringing engagement with creatives to Shetland that we wouldn't necessarily be able to afford to bring to Shetland. I'm particularly thinking about Q&As during a film festival, or even during our book festival, engaging with people that are potentially, you know, New York, Australia, Canada, who we wouldn't be able to afford to fly in, but we could stream in. And we're sort of exploring the blended model backwards, in terms of we'll have a live audience to a streamed reading from an author who is thousands of pounds away in terms of travel. And that's going to be interesting in terms of how that works in terms of a festival feel.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually, just coming on to that point, audiences was kind of the next area that I was thinking about. Is, you know, you've said that there's this potential for vast audiences digitally, you know, but you know, I think we're all in the business, or at least you guys presumably are in the business of real live people coming to real live venues, you know. What do you think people are going to expect, audiences are going to expect to come back to your venues or to come and see you perform? You know, what sort of things have you been thinking about in relation to audiences? Not just to make them feel safe, I suppose, but also to actually to get people, or do you think, as people are saying in relation to the tourism sector, that the Highlands and Islands is going to be so inundated with tourists this summer that it's going to be stopping them at the gates rather than, you know, trying to entice them in? What's your view on that at the moment?
I mean, we had the opportunity to do some live events in the run up to Christmas, again, because we were down into protection level 1, and there was enough latent demand in the system to sell the events out at the reduced capacity those events were running at. And I think we'll be able to go back to local live events quite quickly in terms of people wanting to engage with that sort of performance. But there are going to be sections of the community who aren't going to want to re-engage in the same way. I mean, nearly a year ago now, we launched something called Shetland Unlocked, which was going to be a free festival for the community, a way of nudging people back to events and everything, and a way of sort of getting some money out into freelancers' hands in Shetland. And sort of we can't run that until we're back to full capacity. And, you know, whether we'll run that this year, I think, is highly questionable. I can see us still operating under restrictions for the rest of this 12 months, but I think live events will be back. And I think there is sufficient latent demand in the system that things will get moving quite quickly, but at a much reduced capacity.
Right. Yeah. James, what's your feeling on audiences and what they might want to come back in person?
Well, we were lucky enough, being in the Highland region, to get open for 8 weeks at the end of last year. So we were open from mid-October to mid-December, and it was nerve-wracking, if I'm honest, because we were in such a precarious financial situation, but nonetheless it felt the right thing to do, to reopen our doors because we could, and you know, it's difficult not to sort of just delve straight into statistics, but you know, what we were hearing from audiences was that they wanted to feel safe in our building, that they wanted enhanced cleaning, they wanted that enhanced cleaning protocol to be visible and to be seen, and they of course wanted all the necessary social distancing in place that was required. And you know, what I would say is that we were doing that with a skeletal staff in order to keep as many colleagues as possible in the furlough scheme. And you know, and I was amazed a few weeks ago to see kind of national UK statistics that say that, you know, currently there are 34% of the UK UK businesses using the furlough scheme. 34% of employees are still in it. Well, in my organisation, 91% of my workforce remains in the furlough scheme, as does it in the rest of the performing arts. So in that 8 weeks that we were open, we sold 3,500 cinema tickets and we did 4,500 covers in the restaurant. Now that sounds a huge amount, but actually that averages about 440 people a week coming to the cinema. And what I would say is over that 8 week period, in some weeks we broke even, just in other weeks we made 200, 300 quid. In other weeks we lost 200 or 300 quid. So it was that tight. It was that tight, and that was keeping the footprint of the part of our building open very small. So, you know, but equally we've got that very kind of, you know, numbers driven sort of reality of reopening, and yet, you know, what was such a joy was seeing more vulnerable members of our community coming back out, coming into our building, coming in for a coffee, meeting their friends, and saying to us and saying to my staff really clearly, this is the first time that I have come out in 7 or 8 months. I don't feel comfortable going into that Nero in the city centre because it's too busy. I can't get my walker in there or my wheelchair in there. And what I, you know, was incredibly sort of proud of and reminded of is not, you know, we're not just a place where artists and audiences interact, we're a civic and community space. And we have to balance those responsibilities around community well-being and community recovery with the absolutely nail-biting reality of the precariousness of our financials. And I'm just sort of preparing myself for that balance and that internal debate and challenge to be with us for at least a couple of years, I think.
A couple of years. That's really fascinating. Just coming to you, Mairearad, what I was going to ask you was, have you thought about, you know, how all of this lockdown is it going to change what you actually perform or how you approach live gigs in the future, do you think? Or is it going to change the way you work in terms of the actual music that you play?
Yeah, I mean, and I've been thinking a lot about the kind of more outdoor event and how I can make that happen. There's so many incredible scenic spots around where I am, and I would love to, be in that setting. As much as it's incredible to go to great venues such as Eden Court and Shetland Arts, but just from a point of view from the community here, and in order to feel safe and put on gigs in a kind of safe way, that kind of outdoor thing seems an obvious answer, certainly in the immediate future, but it's who do we work with to sort of make that happen? Can we collaborate with like Scottish National Heritage, just like all these great sites that there are that do have outdoor toilets, that they don't all have coverage like under the canvas, but they do have the setting, and that would be really great to explore that further.
That sounds like quite a kind of a useful conversation to have. And in terms of the actual material that you're thinking about playing, would that change, do you think, or would it just be similar to your kind of live programming that you've done before?
Yeah, I think if I was to move more outside things, I would definitely change the material, and it might be more from a slightly more theatre perspective and that more interactive perspective, and yeah, most of what I do in terms of live performance is very much, you know, playing tunes and singing songs and telling stories, so wouldn't want to change that too much, but possibly, yeah, and doing it thinking from a more digital perspective, it's how just giving more insight to what it is we do, because I think it's quite an unknown livelihood being a folk musician. And I wonder, I've been watching a lot of documentaries on like well-known artists and thinking just how fascinating their lives are, and I wonder if like incorporating not just the performance and the music part, but just that bit more insight into our environment, our approach, and yeah, I haven't thought about that. I haven't got a straight answer for that, but it's definitely, I think we're all creative people, so it can be quite an exciting thing to think ahead and how to approach it all differently. And
I've got another wee poll just to sort of take a sounding on that, so I'm just going to launch that one now. Just this multiple choice for everybody on the meeting, just to get a sense of what people are thinking. So just take everything that applies. If you've got a question, it'd be great to see some more questions now in the chat box. So if you've got something that you'd like me to put to the panel, then do feel free to put your question into text box. There's one from Julia Barton, which is, can the panel share their tips for low-cost digital elements of events for talks, visual and music? She's curating the Isle Martin Seaweed Festival, hashtag YCW 2021. So Julia asked, what tips that might you have, if any, for low-cost digital stuff? Anyone?
Keep it on Zoom, promote it on Facebook.
Very low cost.
It's probably this. It's probably it.
Yeah.
I think using local talent as far as possible. If there are any local filmmakers.
That local people who can actually help you do the technical side of it. So that wee poll gives us a clear majority that people feel on this call, at least anyway, that the Highlands and Islands live events will always be slightly different. So I'm sharing those results now with everybody on the meeting. Yeah, I mean, obviously I don't know what lies behind that, but also we'll use a lot more digital in future as well. And so that's very interesting. One other thing that I think is sort of come out as well recently. There's been a lot of discussion about international visitors to the Highlands and Islands, and I'm just wondering. I don't know what the situation is in Shetland, Graeme, or particularly with Inverness, but I'm wondering what your feeling is about. Is there a way in which you're planning to capitalize on domestic tourism at all, or international tourism, people who are visiting, and how do you reach those people?
I think that's an interesting question. I mean, so Shetland, the TV series, has begun filming in Shetland again this week. And there was a bit of a community backlash against these people coming into the islands to do their jobs and work, which it was very disappointing to see. I think the international travel thing will be an interesting one, and and I'm quite glad that is up to government to work out. We're hoping to be able to bring. So I mean, the islands context is potentially slightly different to people on the mainland, because we hope to be able to start bringing visiting artists here from September, but we are thinking that through cautiously, because we are in service of our community, and we need to be able to respond to their needs. And as much as I found it personally very frustrating to see the kind of the pushback which was covered in the local media and everything about the film crew and the actors coming to Shetland, because Shetland has been such a incredible thing for Shetland as a promotional tool. We also have to acknowledge that those concerns exist and find a way of working with those concerns. So I don't have any answers for you. I mean, East Pointers are a Canadian band, and the plan is for us to be able to put them on, I hope I got that right, in front of what looks like a whole room of folk specialists. East Pointers are not from Scotland, they're from somewhere else. I hire programmers who know about this sort of stuff, so I don't have to. And obviously, you know, the deal with the agent is if they can't get here, gig's cancelled. If they can't get here and play to a full capacity audience, the gig doesn't make sense financially. So I think a lot of it is going to be driven by financial decisions as well.
Yeah. So do we see contracts changing significantly in future?
Well, I mean, not changing, just having an additional clause put in. The pandemic escape clause will be added to most contracts. And certainly agents are in full agreement with that. They don't want to be covering the cost of bringing artists into the country if they're not going to earn back what they need to earn through the box office.
So a bit more contingent. Yeah. Okay, James, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's obviously the issue of tourism, both local, national within Scotland and international. Again, you know, when you posed the question, my immediate thought was actually not so much about audiences and visitors, but about artists. And, you know, but we're really, you know, our mission at Eden Court is to bring the world to the Highlands and the Highlands to the world. And, you know, the very week that we closed, the week before we closed, Carlos Acosta was at Eden Court with his dance company Acosta Danza, made up of Central American dancers, playing to thousands of people. So that, you know, what Eden Court does very proudly is bring people from across the planet to the city to showcase their talent. And the people of the region demonstrate that is what Eden Court should be doing, because they book and they come. You know, so we very much hope that we will be able to return to a business model where that broad diversity of our program, the deep challenging aspect of balancing our program between art forms, between scales, between the highly popular and the avant-garde, you know, that is what makes Eden Court so unique, and what the very nature of our building exists to do. And quite early on, rightly, NHS Highland and the local authority were recognising that Eden Court was a place where people from all parts of the planet congregate, and that poses a risk that we hadn't faced before because we'd never lived through a pandemic. So, you know, as we move forward, we're having to sort of take all of that into account. But we don't at the moment have the ability to sustain a business model or the building if we were to, you know, just be needing to seek talent to put on our stages or to work backstage just within a 15, 20, 40 mile radius.
Yeah, and I've also spoken to people as well, you know, that have said the same thing about, you know, is the live event sector potentially, do they need more support in terms of vaccination and things like that, because they are face to face with people, you know, in the way that other sectors are as well. So, I mean, that's an open question. There's a couple of questions in. Patrick Quinn's saying, wondering, is there a tech skills shortage to support digital hybrid events, IT, video, audio? Is it more of an infrastructure issue with broadband, the perennial issues with broadband across the Highlands and Islands, or both? Any views on that in the panel? Is it skills or infrastructure, both, something else?
I think there is a potential skills shortage. I think the bigger challenge is actually they're expensive skills. They're skills you have to be prepared to pay for to get things done well. They're not cheap. You know, we run degrees and the various qualifications in filmmaking, and these aren't cheap skills for people to acquire. And I think there is a challenge that you always try and do these things on the cheap, because particularly if you are hosting the event live as well, you've got the costs of putting that event on already factored in. And then if you want to do a multi-camera shoot, you're adding thousands of pounds onto the cost of that event. So how we go blended and not go bankrupt, I think is an interesting question. But I think the skills are there if you can afford to pay for them.
Yeah. Okay, anyone else?
I think that it's both. I think it's both. There's an issue around skill shortage, but there's also a major issue around infrastructure. If it's just too windy here on the Black Isle, my broadband connection can be rubbish, and I might lose 3 Zoom meetings, let alone streaming in a high definition, full length play. So I think there absolutely are significant issues around infrastructure. I guess. The other thing that I'm sort of minded to say, which I'm sure are conversations that are going on in arts organisations across the country, is that let's not just leap to the digital. I think there are other questions that we could be asking about how we improve access. For example, why do shows start at 7:30 in the evening? Whose rule is that? Where is that written down? And there's particular aspects of our programme where audiences, might be predominantly in their 60s or 70s or 80s. And when we survey those audiences, they tell us that their barriers to access are things like they don't particularly like driving in the dark. So for example, why does that show need to be at 7:30 in the evening when they're tipping out of Eden Court at 10:30? I think there are other questions we need to be asking ourselves in addition to how we go online.
Yeah, and we're not talking about music education today, but it's increasingly coming up in conversations I'm having that just the sheer, dearth of any kind of live participatory teaching of music or drama or anything like that is something that I think requires some kind of national level effort to correct. Yeah, Mairearad, was teaching part of your portfolio, or is it at the moment, or?
I don't do any one-to-one tuition, but I do quite a lot of work for Fèis Roche, so for their adult Fèis, their senior Fèis, and yeah.
We've got a question here about fees for musicians from David Francis. Thanks for that, David. He's worried about the effect on fees and whether musicians will put up with depressed fees for the sake of getting to play. Lower door splits and reduced capacity means less money in the door. Do we think is that going to happen at festivals and events? Are we going to have lower fees overall, like in the way that James was talking about for large venues like Eden Court, but for other festivals as well?
James was not saying at Eden Court there's going to be depressed fees, just for the purpose of the room. I in fact, quite the opposite, actually. I really appreciate and understand, because my friendship network is made up of artists that, not just here in Scotland, but across the United Kingdom, and it has been devastating to see how devastated their careers have been over the last 12 months or so. And so, what I'm doing in my own organisation, which is immensely challenging, is trying to actually rebalance how we spend our staffing budget between rebalance that budget between artists and administrators. Now that's creating some very, very difficult conversations for me. Because I'm having to say that as we move forward, Eden Court is likely to provide employment to less administrators, people working backstage and off stage, and more opportunities and employment opportunities, both on a kind of freelance, part-time and full-time basis for artists. Because that, we've had this opportunity of a hard reset. I think it's really right that I ask these questions and try and rebalance in this way. Yeah.
Yeah. No,
When I took over Shetland Arts 6 years ago, we restructured on the basis of how could we get more money to flow through the organisation out into whether that was to artists or creative freelancers, or even a local freelance admin support, whatever we needed to do to get the money flowing through the organisation. We've always had to negotiate hard on artists' fees. It's never been something that's easy for us, because You know, where the majority of our income is earned commercially, not through funding. So we're an unusual balance in terms of an arts organisation. So I don't think it's necessarily going to change those conversations. I think whilst social distancing remains, and whilst there is still an unbalanced or not a very good understanding of how to monetize the online experience effectively, there may well be just less gigs we can do. I mean, there may well be just less moments where the fee the artist is willing to perform for and the fee that we can afford meet. And that I think is just going to be unfortunate, but we obviously can't risk the organisation, and the artists have to value what they do to the level they need to value it at, you know, and I would support that fully.
And actually, let's also remember, it's not always just about, it's not as simple as a relationship between artist and audience. There's quite often a promoter and agent in the middle. And to give you a very real example, when Eden Court was planning to restart live performance in January, February, March, when we expected to still be in level 1 and you know, pre-variants, and we were building a kind of lights up live performance program with audiences of no more than 100 with social distancing, we had some very surprising conversations actually with artists who we perceived to be very loyal to us as an organisation, us saying, we're the only theatre of scale in Scotland that can restart live performance. We'd love to have you. You can only play to 100 people, but this is an important moment for Scotland and we can afford a fee of X, which felt in line with union rates, in line with, you know, where we were no way going to make that money back at box office, but where the response from the agent or the promoter, not necessarily the artist, was no, my artist will not pay, you know, will not play for that fee. Yeah. You know, so, you know, I think it's complicated. Yeah.
There's in the way that things have really affected people in very uneven ways. I think in the public, it has affected the art sector very unevenly as well. Some people are making more money now as well, which I've noticed. Artists making more money during lockdown than they did before. Just to finish off, there's a wee poll I'm launching here about whether or not you feel positive about the future of live events in the Highlands and Islands, or negative or worried or waiting to see. So just whatever you're gonna put in there will be interesting. Sentiment. Sorry, go on, Graeme.
Sorry, I was going to say, I think you have to feel positive. I mean, there aren't any live events happening. It can't really get a lot worse.
Can't get much.
So I think you have to feel positive about what the future might be.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Yeah. Well, I mean, that assumes that they are returning, you know, Graeme.
Oh, they'll be back.
Yeah, they'll be back. Okay. I'd just like to say thanks to the panel. I think one of the things that I wanted to do with this is we're going to do another one in May, another one in June, another one in July, and just to try and keep the conversation going. There isn't a great kind of public discussion other than some really key actors who have been leading that discussion in the industry, like the Touring Network have been leading discussions with their meetups and things like that. But I do feel that you know, there's room for more public discussion about these sorts of issues. So I'd really like to thank Mairearad Green, James Mackenzie-Blackman, and also Graeme Howell for joining us today. So you can show your appreciation with the button thingamabob and say well done and give them a clap. And I'm going to end that poll there and share the results with you. And so that's good. So people are kind of waiting, hesitant and positive. So that's good. Okay. Thanks everybody for joining us. I know lots of us have got other Zoom meetings awaiting us at 2 p.m. So many thanks to the panel and for you all for attending.
Thanks very much, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.